And hello, I'm Steve. Um, I thought it might be helpful just to share a small part of my dad's Alzheimer's story, and in particular, consider some of the things that in retrospect, or maybe we, it's myself and my two sisters, may have perhaps approached a little differently. It starts in 2010. Mum and dad were both still working, fit, well, very active. The immediate family all lived fairly close by, and between us, we would see quite a lot of them. It all began really when Mum started to make the occasional non-specific comment about Dad and his forgetting things, or the increase in his habit of going back and forth to the garage to look for things for no obvious reason. But in all honesty, he'd always spent time pottering and sorting things, so it didn't seem too much out of character or anything to necessarily worry about. But then we did start to notice and hear things that did begin to concern us a little. For example, he got lost driving home from work, a journey he'd done hundreds of times before, and in an area he'd known and lived in all of his life. He would start to lose the thread of a conversation. He would stop mid sentence and then just laugh or giggle and then start talking again. He would struggle to find words occasionally. And you could tell he was really struggling to find that word, and he just couldn't. And he would repeat the same story, which he always did anyway, but back to back. He would finish a story and then start telling it to you again. Now, Dad didn't really seem to be noticing this, and our mum talked to us about it at all. She did say that he needed to go to the doctors, but that was about all. It was very much an issue that Mum was taking care of. The trigger for my sisters and I to get more involved was about hearing how Dad had been while they were away on holiday. Mum came back quite upset as Dad had experienced several evening and nighttime episodes, suddenly becoming very confused, very anxious, and fearful of something. By the morning, he would appear fine and largely unaware of the night before, but clearly something was wrong and troubling him. So Dad saw various doctors, and he had tests and so on. But even then, I don't really remember thinking too hard myself about where's this going or what could it ultimately mean. And then around mid 2011, I went with them both to the hospital appointment where Dad was told he had Alzheimer's. Well, for quite a while afterwards, things seemed to go reasonably fine. He was on medication and there's no obvious outward change. Mum appeared very much to be in control, as always. And Dad, who did slowly start to behave more like how we imagined a person living with Alzheimer's would do, was still very much up and about and engaged and aware, and happy enough. Inevitably, things did slowly deteriorate. And as Dad's behaviours became increasingly more challenging, Mum was also increasingly struggling to cope. But in not wanting to bother us or tell us, she continued to keep the worst of it from us. We did know that Mum had been engaged with the memory clinic at West Middlesex Hospital, and they did offer lots of options and help around things like daycare visits, respite stays, just having people over for the afternoon to sit with Dad so that Mum could get some time for herself. Some of these she accepted, some of them she really didn't want to, but it was a start. Looking back at that time, Mum, and by extension Dad, because they could no longer spend any time apart, were obviously becoming increasingly withdrawn and isolated. Then, after a couple of minor incidents at the home, Mum did open up to us about how difficult it was caring for Dad, and we all immediately stepped up, stepped in, and to some extent took a little bit of control, just so that Mum could get some rest and Dad could be looked after. Even then, I don't remember really digging into the situation and trying to understand what was going on and what it was likely going to turn into. We just kind of got on with the immediate problem. So we started to play more of a part, and then everything changed again. Unbeknownst to us, Dad was getting into situations that Mum just could not handle on her own. His favourite was to slide out of the chair in the front room and lay on the floor and not get up again, which was becoming impossible for Mum to cope with. That came to a head when an ambulance crew, who Mum called to help get him off the floor, admitted him to hospital. And it was then when we first, as a family, really encountered the medics and the memory clinic people that we really appreciated and understood not just Dad's position, but the level of support and care that they would both be needing from that point on. We were also introduced to social services, and none of us had had any interaction with them at all before. They knew nothing about Dad or his situation and appeared very surprised about how far Mum had been able to take things essentially on her own. The issue we had in them not knowing much about him was that they really wanted to start their process quite early. They wanted to try things that Dad was way past, that would have been helpful for Dad. Entirely reasonable on their part, but he needed a lot more. That resulted in us having to get up to speed very, very quickly with how the social care system works, and essentially having to mount a bit of a case to get him the help he needed. But we got there. And in 2016, he was put into a care home, which sadly, but ultimately was the best thing. As far as the story goes, that's about all of it that's relevant to today. But just considering those things again, that maybe we would have done differently if we had the time again, it really didn't occur to me to seek out any sort of advice or guidance on what was happening either in the moment or how the situation was going to evolve. If we had, the value of that knowledge and information later on would have been invaluable. It would have been huge. Maybe because it was a day-by-day thing. There wasn't that massive acute problem where you obviously need to go and seek help. It was a day-by-day thing. And I think we got into a position where we didn't know we needed help because we just kind of got used to it. Just as an observation, both of my parents were very proud and private people, and trying to help them was hard and difficult because they didn't really want to ask. They felt embarrassed. I don't have an answer for that one. It's just an observation on my experience. And just as a final point, the having to bring social services up to speed with where Dad was and go through those motions, we do wonder whether, if we'd managed to engage them sooner with an assessment of some description or some lower level piece of help that could have been useful, maybe it could have made that end stage easier and quicker. But otherwise, yeah, that's all I have. I hope it's been of some use. Thank you very much.